In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. When you upset a glass, what spills out? Whatever it's full of. When you upset a person, what spills out? Whatever they're full of. Out of the fullness of the heart, Jesus says, the mouth speaks. By which he means, if you want to know what you're full of, listen to yourself talk. Okay, when I am full of gratitude, that's what spills out of my mouth. When I'm full of anger, that's what spills out of my mouth. When I'm full of myself, that's what spills out of my mouth. If you want to know what I'm full of, listen to me talk. But you can't tell what I'm full of this morning by listening to me talk right now. Because right now, I am carefully watching my words. Most of the words I am saying this morning, I prepared to say beforehand. Okay, they're my words. I mean every word I'm saying, but most of these words have been very carefully chosen, or at least fairly carefully chosen. Okay, this is one of these rare occasions when I've taken time to think before I talk. If you really want to know what I'm thinking at any given moment, you have to get me to talk before I think. If you want to know what I'm full of at any given moment, you have to surprise me or upset me enough to get me to go off script. It's when I'm off script that the real me spills out of my mouth. And that's when I do most of my damage. And that's what this morning's second lesson is about, the damage we do with our mouths. The funny part here, if there is a funny part here, is that the second lesson is from the letter of James. And the great theme of James's letter is that talk is cheap. True religion isn't what you say with your mouth, James says over and over again. True religion is what you do with your life. Words don't count, he repeatedly says. Deeds count. Okay, that's funny, because what he says in this morning's passage is that words do count. I suppose because talking is one of the deeds we do. For good or for ill, our words do things to other people. For good or for ill, our words have power. Our words have power to bless other people, James says, and they also have the power to curse. Okay, I think we sometimes fail to appreciate the power that words of encouragement can have, not just the way that, just to change the way a person feels, but the way a person thinks, and sometimes the way a person lives. I know we sometimes fail to appreciate how deeply cutting remarks can damage other people and disable other people and change the way they live. Okay, people's lives get wrecked by the way other people use words on them or at them or about them. Communities get wrecked by the way people use their mouths. Gossip, which for most of us is just cheap entertainment, can destroy a community. Complaint, which for most of us is free therapy, is capable of demoralizing, dividing, and destroying a community. Angie and I were members of a community that got wrecked by complaint. Okay, when we complain about other people instead of complaining to the person we're complaining about, that's just a form of gossip. And it's destructive to persons and to our community. The tongue is like a little flame, James says, which can ignite and destroy a whole forest. Now, there are some people who deliberately, maliciously set out to injure other people or to disable communities with their mouths. But like most forest fires, most of those catastrophes happen by accident. Because somebody is careless with their mouth, because somebody is not guarding their tongue, because somebody didn't think before they spoke. Okay, so do we all need scripts in order to keep our mouths from doing that? Okay, we are a community that uses scripts. Okay, our liturgy, for instance, is scripted. But many of our casual conversations are scripted, not in the sense that we've written down everything we're going to say beforehand, but in the sense that many of our conversations unfold according to a well-established pattern. Like, for instance, how you doing? Great. How you doing? Great. How's your family? Great. How's your kids? Great. Great. How about those Mets? Now, I like conversations like that because I like the Mets. But if my friend and I never get off that script, my friend and I are never really going to be very good friends. Because we're never really going to care that much about each other, because we're never really going to get to know each other well enough to care. But the truth is that we sometimes use that script in order to avoid getting to know another person, because we're trying to avoid having to care about the other person, because it's easier to care about the Mets than each other. But that's not the only script we use. I'm sure many of us have friends with whom we habitually drop into talking about other people, with whom the well-established pattern is gossip, or complaint, or innocently wondering aloud what somebody else is doing, or what somebody else is thinking, or what somebody else's motives must be. Now, I think we sometimes do that because we're trying to avoid talking about ourselves and what we've got in our hearts. But when we talk about what other people have in their hearts, we are divulging what's in ours. We don't realize it, but we're spilling what we're full of. And we're spraying it all over everybody else. Scripts can't save us. Our liturgy can't even save us. Our liturgy is just trying to help us. Part of the reason we use a scripted liturgy is because our liturgy puts some things into words that we might have trouble sometimes putting into words of our own. And we use a scripted liturgy in part because our hearts aren't always in the right place. Not everybody goes to church every Sunday full of faith, or full of gratitude, or full of love. Okay, sometimes we're full of other things. Sometimes we're full of ourselves. And sometimes we're empty. And we borrow the words of the liturgy because sometimes we just can't find anything in here to spill. We borrow the words of the liturgy because we believe that words have power. Words don't just reflect what's in our hearts. Words can actually affect what's in our hearts. What we say with our mouths is felt down here. We recite those words of faith and hope and love and contrition and forgiveness because we believe that by saying those words, we can learn those words in our hearts. Not just in the sense that we memorize those words, in the sense that we are internalizing those words. So that when we're off script, what spills out of our mouths blesses instead of curses. Okay, we need to be able to go off script with God and with each other. Granting everything St. James says about watching our words and guarding our tongues and thinking before we speak, we need each of us to be able to spill what's in our hearts. Okay, our faith, our gratitude, our love, speaking these things, putting these things in our hearts into words, actually solidifies and secures these things in our hearts. Okay, the same thing is true of all the nasty stuff in our hearts. It just works the opposite way. Okay, our anger, our fears, our guilt, failing to put those things into words lodges them in our hearts and solidifies them in our hearts, where they just keep doing their damage. Silence isn't always golden. Some things must be said. Okay, we need to be able to still some things. There is a time and a place for spilling these things, but we all need a time and a place. And we all need other people who will let us spill them and who will hear us when we do, because we each need to be known for who we really are, because we each need to be cared about, cared for, and supported, and we are never going to be cared about and supported until we let ourselves be known. Okay, we each need a relatively small group of people and a safe group of people with whom we don't have to watch our mouths, with whom we don't have to guard our tongues, with whom we don't have to think before we speak. I don't mean a group of people with whom we're free to gossip. I mean a group of people we can trust enough that they won't gossip, and with whom we can trust enough to let our hair down a little bit and let our guard down a little bit, and with whom we can go off script so that we can be known. To be known is a fundamental human need, and it is a fundamental building block of Christian spirituality. And that's why we're introducing small groups at St. John's this fall. Okay, a small group is just a small group of people who can do something together that the big group of us can't do together. Get to know each other better. Okay, different small groups do that a little bit differently. There's a few lines in your bulletin this morning about a few small groups. Next Sunday, at coffee hour in the gym, we're going to have a small groups fair, and you can amble around the gym and speak to different small group leaders and see what their group is about and see which group serves you best. This is my interest in small groups. Churches that have small groups grow because small groups help people grow by helping us make ourselves known to others. That's how people grow. Okay, if we don't know each other, then all our talk about loving each other is cheap talk. The only way to know anybody well enough to love them is to have heard them go off script, to have made them safe enough to go off script, and to have heard us go off script ourselves. Okay, that's related to our mission, because the world today is full of people who feel themselves unknown. Okay, the funny part, if there is a funny part, is that our society has never communicated more freely than we do today. We've never had fewer inhibitions. We've never observed less etiquette. We've never felt less obliged to watch our mouths. And we have never been more isolated from each other. Okay? I am not blaming our communications technology for this, but our communications technology just vividly illustrates this. We use telephones today and other devices which enable us and encourage us to an absurd, insane, frequently obscene level of self-disclosure. Okay, at the most innocent level, our mass communication devices enable and encourage us to mass communicate every random thought and every nasty thought that happens to cross our minds immediately, without thinking, to everyone, without discrimination. And yet most people have never had a meaningful conversation with their next door neighbors. How many people do we know that live on our own block? We have never communicated more, and we have never communicated less. We are constantly chattering with virtual strangers, and they never cease to be strangers. Our relationships are increasingly verbose, and they're increasingly virtual. Okay. Our mission is to be a community that welcomes in strangers and gives them a safe place where they can be known for who they really are. We can only do that for them if we've done it for ourselves and each other. We ought to be an oasis in a wasteland of mass communications where everybody has seen everybody else naked and nobody knows anybody else personally. Is it any wonder that so many people feel like they don't know God? So many people don't know what it's like to be known themselves. Okay. Whether or not we really know each other very well today, we know that we're known. We're known by God for who we really are, and we are loved by God for who we really are, regardless of what we're full of. And He makes Himself known to us for who He really is and what He's really full of. And we know what He's full of, because what He's full of, He spills.